Good evening, everyone. Today, we're diving into a subject that many find confusing, frustrating, and let's be honest, sometimes deeply emotional. Why do men return after no contact? You've probably been there. A relationship ends, silence follows. You're healing, growing, maybe even moving on. And then, bam, he's back. A message, a light. Hey, how have you been? One of the most overlooked but powerful reasons men return after a period of no contact is because they begin to miss the emotional bond they once shared with you. At first, when a breakup happens, many men respond with logic or even avoidance. They focus on distractions, whether it's work, social life, or hobbies. They may seem unaffected on the surface, even indifferent. But underneath that exterior, the emotional connection doesn't just vanish. It lingers in moments of silence, in places you visited together, in songs, in scents, and in the rhythms of everyday life that once included you. Men are often conditioned not to express their emotions as openly as women. Society tells them to be strong, to move on, and to suppress their feelings rather than explore them. Because of this, they might not initially feel the emotional vacuum your absence creates. But over time, once the noise fades and the distractions wear thin, the reality of the emotional loss begins to sink in. They start to feel the weight of the connection they once took for granted. It doesn't hit all at once. It creeps in slowly, often when they least expect it. You may not realize it, but emotional intimacy is rare. When a man feels safe, seen, and emotionally open with someone, it leaves a lasting impression on him. These emotional bonds act like invisible threads. Even if he thought he wanted the relationship to end, those threads remain. And during a period of no contact, those memories often begin to replay in his mind. Conversations that mattered, laughs you shared, the support you gave him during tough times. These memories stir something deeper than just desire. They awaken longing. What's powerful about no contact is that it creates space. That space forces a person to confront what's real. In that silence, a man is left with nothing but himself and the emotions he tried to bury. The bond you created with him becomes more vivid because it is no longer being nurtured. And that absence makes him feel the emotional connection more intensely. Unlike physical attraction or surface level interest, emotional bonds age well. They become more powerful over time, especially when a man begins to understand what he truly lost. Even small gestures become significant when viewed through the lens of memory. He may recall the way you looked at him when he shared his fears or how you encouraged him when he doubted himself. These moments might have seemed ordinary at the time, but in retrospect, they feel extraordinary because real emotional support is hard to come by. When he realizes that no one else makes him feel as emotionally grounded or safe as you did, that's when the urge to return grows strong. It's not just about missing you, it's about missing who he was when he was with you. It's important to understand that emotional bonds are not just about affection, they're about identity. When someone connects with us emotionally, they become part of our inner world. For many men, that inner world is something they rarely share fully with anyone else. So when they lose that, it's not just a breakup. It feels like a part of their emotional foundation is gone. And often they come back not because they suddenly become more emotionally intelligent, but because they crave the comfort, the understanding, and the emotional alignment they once had with you. This is why no contact isn't a game, it's a mirror. It reflects back the reality of what was lost. And when a man begins to feel the emotional void left behind, he often reaches back toward the last place where he felt emotionally connected, understood, and accepted. He misses the emotional bond, not because he's lonely in general, but because he realizes that what he had with you was unique and not easily replaced. Another major reason men often return after a period of no contact is rooted not in love, but in ego and the need for validation. While this may sound harsh, it's an essential truth to understand if you want clarity about someone's intentions. When you initiate no contact or go silent after a breakup, it can trigger a very specific emotional reaction in some men. They begin to feel a loss of control. And often, it's not about the relationship itself, it's about what your silence represents. You are no longer feeding their sense of importance or identity, and that can be deeply unsettling. The male ego, shaped by societal norms and personal insecurities, often craves affirmation. In a relationship, that validation might come through your attention, your support, your availability. When all of that disappears suddenly, it leaves a void. Many men, especially those who are used to being chased or admired, find this silence intolerable. It's not necessarily that they miss you as a person right away. It's that they miss the feeling of being wanted. The absence of that reassurance shakes their self-image, and they reach out in an effort to restore it. This is particularly true if they believed you would always be there. If they thought you checked in, react to their posts, or send a birthday message. Your silence sends a different message. You are reclaiming your power. And for someone who was used to emotional availability on demand, that feels like a blow to their ego. They may begin to wonder, wait, does she not care anymore? Or has she found someone else? These questions don't arise from introspection. They stem from a need to know they still hold space in your mind. Men with fragile egos may even begin to reinterpret the breakup not as a mutual decision, but as a test of their desirability. They start scanning for signs that they're still relevant to you. Did you view their story? Did you like a post? Did you ask mutual friends about them? When you remain silent and unbothered, that ego suffers another small fracture. And ironically, that's often when they reach out, not because they've grown, but because they're hoping to be seen again, to be acknowledged again, to be validated again. It's important to distinguish between emotional longing and ego-driven reentry. If a man contacts you but only offers vague messages like, I was just thinking about you, or hey, stranger, without addressing the breakup or expressing genuine emotion, it may be a sign he's fishing for validation. He wants to know if he can still get your attention. If you respond, it soothes his ego, even if he has no intention of truly reconciling or working through the past. In this way, you become a mirror reflecting his worth, rather than a person he genuinely wants to reconnect with. This pattern is even more pronounced in men who are used to being pursued or praised. If you broke that pattern with no contact, you disrupted their emotional ecosystem. They may not have realized how much they relied on your validation until it was gone, and now they want that feeling back. Not because they're ready to invest, but because they're uncomfortable with being invisible to someone who once made them feel significant. That's not love, it's insecurity masquerading as longing. Understand, this doesn't mean you should be cynical, it means you should be conscious. When a man returns during no contact, always ask yourself, is he here to reconnect with me or to rebuild his ego through me? Because someone returning out of wounded pride is not the same as someone returning with self-awareness and real intentions. The difference lies in how they communicate, how they take accountability, and whether they see you as a person or just a source of validation. A profound reason men often come back after a period of no contact is the growing fear of true loss. In the beginning, many don't believe the breakup is permanent. Whether they initiate it or not, they often assume they can come back whenever they choose, that you'll still be there. This false sense of security can delay emotional urgency. But over time, something begins to shift. Your silence creates uncertainty, And that uncertainty becomes a trigger. It's no longer just a breakup in theory. It starts to feel like a real, irreversible loss. Fear of loss is a powerful motivator, often stronger than love or desire. When a man begins to sense that he may not be able to access you anymore, it forces him to confront something he had previously avoided, the reality that you're not waiting, you're not chasing, and you may genuinely be moving on. And in that realization, panic can set in, not always loudly, but subtly, like a voice that grows louder with every unanswered message or missed opportunity to reach out. Time plays a key role here. At first, the silence is tolerable, even welcome, but as the days turn into weeks or months, that silence becomes deafening. The possibility that you might be healing, growing, or even finding someone else becomes very real. That's when fear starts to outweigh pride. Men who once thought they had the upper hand begin to question their assumptions. What if she's happier now? What if she never comes back? What if I'm the one who lost something irreplaceable? This fear isn't always about the romantic aspect alone. Sometimes it's tied to the familiarity, the emotional security, the shared history. Losing a partner also means losing the identity you had with that person. The inside jokes, the routines, the sense of belonging. And the more a man realizes that those things aren't coming back, the more he starts to question if letting go was truly the right choice. What once felt like freedom now starts to feel like isolation. This kind of fear doesn't show up in grand gestures at first. It might be subtle, a text at an odd hour, a view on your story, a message through a mutual friend. These are feelers, attempts to see if the door is still cracked open. And if you don't respond, that fear deepens. He begins to understand that he's not just losing access to your time. He's losing a connection that gave him emotional grounding, even if he didn't fully appreciate it before. The irony is that sometimes it takes your total absence for him to finally feel your true value, not because you changed, but because the space you once filled is now empty. And that absence speaks louder than any conversation. Men are often slower to internalize emotional consequences, and your no contact period gives them the silence they need to hear their own thoughts. Often those thoughts start echoing with doubt, regret, and the question, did I really let her go for good? This fear of loss is not always negative. It can lead to clarity, but it can also lead to impulsive returns, not because they're ready, but because they're scared. That's why it's important to look at how they return. Do they come with openness, honesty, and accountability, or do they return urgently, selfishly, hoping to relieve their discomfort? Fear may bring them back, but what they do next reveals whether it's growth or just desperation. Another powerful force that draws men back after a period of no contact is curiosity, a quiet but persistent question that begins to haunt them. What is she doing without me? At first, they may not notice your absence in a meaningful way. They might be wrapped up in distractions, surrounded by friends, or even exploring new connections. But over time, as things settle and the silence stretches on, the mind begins to wander. That curiosity becomes a seed that grows with each passing day you don't reach out. The unknown becomes more uncomfortable than the breakup itself. This curiosity isn't just about checking in. It's about not knowing. When a man no longer has access to your emotions, your attention, or your energy, he begins to imagine the possibilities. He wonders if you're healing, thriving, dating someone new, or if you've completely erased him from your life. And it's often the fear that you're doing better without him that stirs him the most. It challenges the version of the breakup he told himself, especially if he believed he was the one in control when things ended. What you post or don't post can also fuel this curiosity. If you've gone quiet on social media, your silence can be louder than any caption. It creates a vacuum of information that the imagination rushes to fill. If you're posting but doing so with confidence, looking happy, glowing, evolving, he may start to wonder if you've already moved on. This triggers not only curiosity, but a sense of being replaced, whether he was ready to move on or not. Seeing you unbothered disrupts the narrative in his mind that you would be heartbroken without him. It's also worth noting that some men don't truly consider your life separate from theirs until after no contact. In the relationship, you may have been intertwined emotionally, mentally, even physically. But when you disappear and stop responding, he's forced to consider that you're living an entire life he's no longer part of. The places you go, the people you see, the choices you make, all of that is happening without his knowledge or involvement. And for many men, that's a deeply unsettling realization. Curiosity becomes most intense when mixed with insecurity. If there were unresolved issues in the relationship, if he took you for granted, or if the breakup was one-sided, he may now question whether someone else is giving you what he didn't. This line of thinking can drive obsessive behaviors. He might scroll through your old posts, ask mutual friends about you, or find small, subtle ways to check if you're still emotionally available. Not because he's ready to return wholeheartedly, but because he wants to know. This kind of curiosity is rarely innocent. It's often driven by a deeper fear. You're becoming a stranger. The longer you go without speaking, the more foreign your world becomes to him. And that distance can feel threatening to someone who once held a meaningful place in your life. It's not uncommon for a man to reappear just to test the waters, to see if he still has emotional access. He might say something casual, just wondering how you've been. But beneath that simplicity lies a much bigger question: am I still relevant to you? Understanding this doesn't mean you need to answer that question. In fact, your silence often answers it best. When a man returns out of curiosity, he's not always prepared for what he might find. Sometimes he discovers you're no longer the same person. You've grown, healed, and started a new chapter, one that may not include him. And while curiosity might bring him back to your door, it's your evolution that determines whether he stays or realizes he's already been left behind. One of the less talked about but very real reasons men return after no contact is because of delayed emotional processing. Unlike what many assume, not everyone grieves or processes a breakup in real time. While some people feel the emotional impact immediately, others, especially men, often suppress or postpone that emotional reckoning. It's not that they don't feel anything, it's that they've been conditioned, often from a young age, to ignore, distract, or bury their emotions rather than face them head on. When a relationship ends, many men turn to avoidance as their first coping strategy. They throw themselves into work, hobbies, casual dating, or even over-socializing. Anything that keeps them from sitting still and feeling. In the short term, this seems effective. On the outside, they may appear to be thriving, moving on effortlessly, or even enjoying their newfound freedom. But that emotional detachment is usually temporary. At some point, the distractions lose their power, and what they've been avoiding begins to rise to the surface. It often starts subtly through flashbacks, memories, and emotional triggers they didn't expect. A certain smell, a familiar song, a random photo. These things can open emotional doors that had been firmly closed for weeks or months. And once that door is open, all the pain, confusion, and emotional weight they've been avoiding comes flooding in. That's when they begin to process what truly happened. It's no longer about the surface details of the breakup. It becomes about the emotional loss of someone who mattered. For many men, this is the first time they actually feel the breakup in its full depth. They start to realize how much of themselves they invested or failed to invest. And they begin to understand the emotional safety and connection they once had with you. But by the time they reach that awareness, You've already had weeks or months to heal, reflect, and possibly grow past the relationship. That lag in emotional processing creates an imbalance. He's just beginning to grieve what you've already accepted. This delay often leads to confusion on both sides. You might be surprised or even annoyed when he finally reaches out, seemingly out of nowhere. To you, it feels like ancient history, but to him, it's suddenly fresh, raw, and overwhelming. He might come across as emotional, apologetic, or even desperate, not because he's manipulative, but because his emotional timeline is just now catching up. He's finally facing what you've already lived through, and it can hit him like a tidal wave. Emotional suppression isn't always a choice. It's often a learned behavior. Many men have never been taught how to sit with discomfort or explore their feelings in a healthy way. So when the silence of no contact removes all the distractions, they're forced to confront emotions they don't know how to name or navigate. They may not even be returning with a clear intention. They just know they're feeling something intense and unfamiliar, and they associate that feeling with you. What's important to understand is that this kind of emotional delay doesn't always mean the return is meaningful or permanent. Sometimes it's a reaction, not a decision. They want relief from the weight of their emotions, and reaching out to you feels like the quickest way to find it. But without emotional maturity and reflection, that contact can be more about soothing their own discomfort than rebuilding something healthy. The delay may explain why they're coming back, but it doesn't guarantee they're ready for what reconciliation actually requires. One of the most significant yet complex reasons a man may return after a period of no contact is because you triggered his growth or his guilt. Often, the very act of your silence becomes a mirror in which he's forced to see himself more clearly. During the relationship, especially if it ended on rocky terms, he may have dismissed your words, avoided accountability, or ignored your emotional needs. But once you go quiet, the excuses fade, and the space left in your absence forces him to reckon with his actions or lack thereof. Guilt is an emotion that doesn't always show up immediately. It's often buried under layers of ego, pride, or self-righteousness. In the early stages of a breakup, especially if he believes he had valid reasons or if he was emotionally distant, he might rationalize everything. He might tell himself that you were too emotional, too demanding, or that he had to leave. But time has a way of softening certainty, and as silence grows, reflection begins. He starts to remember the things he said in anger, the times he shut down when you needed support, or how he slowly withdrew without explanation. When he reflects without distraction, and especially if he sees you thriving, it can trigger a sharp awareness that he may have failed to show up as the man you needed. That realization can be painful. The guilt that arises from that awareness isn't just about feeling bad. It's about facing the fact that his behavior hurt someone who genuinely cared. For many men, this is the beginning of emotional growth, the moment where regret starts to transform into responsibility. But it's not always immediate or smooth. Your decision to go silent may have been the first time he experienced a boundary he couldn't push past. You didn't beg, chase, or try to fix him. And that in itself is often shocking for men who are used to women doing the emotional labor after conflict. When you hold your ground, it removes his ability to project blame outward. He can no longer say, she's just overreacting, because you're not reacting at all. That composure and distance demand a different kind of confrontation, the one he has with himself. Sometimes this confrontation leads to real, lasting growth. He begins to take accountability, to understand the patterns he repeated, and to see how his fears, immaturity, or emotional unavailability sabotaged a good thing. In this case, your absence doesn't just sting, it becomes a catalyst. You become the woman who showed him through your silence what emotional maturity really looks like. And in the best case scenario, he doesn't just return, he evolves. Not because you forced it, but because you stopped trying to save him. Other times, however, guilt can lead to a less healthy return. Instead of growing from it, he tries to erase it by reconnecting quickly, hoping to rewrite the ending or soothe his conscience. He may reach out to say things like, I just want to apologize, or I've been thinking about you a lot. But if he hasn't done any deep inner work, these words may be more about easing his guilt than rebuilding a true connection. Guilt without growth can lead to empty gestures, apologies without change, and temporary reconnection that quickly falls apart. This is why it's crucial to evaluate how he returns, not just that he returns. If he's showing signs of maturity, self-awareness, and a willingness to take emotional responsibility, then your absence may have truly triggered growth. But if he's seeking comfort without accountability, then guilt, not love, is driving his actions. And while guilt may bring him to your door, it's his growth or the lack of it that will determine whether he's truly ready for something real. Another powerful reason a man may return after a period of no contact is because he feels safe again, not just in the world, but specifically in relation to you. Breakups often happen in the midst of emotional overwhelm, confusion, or inner turmoil. If he was dealing with stress, personal failure, family issues, or even unresolved emotional wounds from past relationships, he may have seen intimacy as a threat rather than a sanctuary. In those moments, connection feels too vulnerable and his instinct might be to retreat. But once those chaotic waters settle, he may begin to see your presence in a new light, not as pressure, but as peace. Feeling emotionally safe is a requirement for authentic closeness, especially for someone who struggles to communicate or even understand his own feelings. For many men, safety doesn't come from the absence of conflict. It comes from consistency, emotional space, and a sense that their partner won't attack or abandon them for their flaws. When you go no contact, ironically, you may provide the very space he needed to finally breathe, recalibrate, and reflect. In that quiet, he begins to realize that the chaos wasn't coming from you, it was already inside him. At first, this distance might have felt like rejection or finality. But as time goes on and no dramatic confrontations or emotional explosions follow, something subtle begins to happen. His nervous system relaxes. He no longer associates your name with tension or emotional demand. Instead, he starts to remember the warmth, the emotional availability, the calmness you brought to his life. He begins to feel safe thinking about you again, which is the first step toward reaching out. Safety doesn't just come from how you made him feel, it also comes from what you didn't do. You didn't chase, guilt, or manipulate him into returning. You didn't create drama or force closure. That restraint tells him something very important. You are emotionally stable. For someone who fears emotional volatility or entrapment, that realization can be incredibly grounding. He may even look back and realize that during the relationship, you were the more mature, steady presence, something he wasn't able to fully appreciate when he was emotionally reactive. In many cases, men confuse emotional safety with boredom while they're in the relationship. They mistake your reliability for predictability. But after the silence, after seeing what chaos really feels like, or after experiencing surface level connections with others, your emotional steadiness stands out in sharp contrast. The safety he now feels is not just about comfort. It's about a rare kind of trust. You showed by walking away with dignity that you wouldn't weaponize closeness or punish vulnerability. Sometimes the trigger that reignites the sense of safety is subtle. It might be a small memory, a comparison to someone new, or a reminder of a moment where you held space for him when no one else did. Those moments begin to resurface in his mind, not because he's romanticizing you, but because his emotional defenses are slowly lowering. He may even begin to think, maybe I was wrong about her. Maybe I wasn't ready for someone like her. And this shift from self-protection to openness is what allows him to reach back out. When he feels safe again, it's not always dramatic. He may return quietly, cautiously, with messages that feel gentle or slightly hesitant. He may not say everything at once, but you'll notice he's more emotionally present than before. His return isn't just about missing you, it's about feeling calm in your presence, seen without judgment, and valued without pressure. In a world that often expects men to be guarded and tough, emotional safety becomes rare, and the person who provided it becomes unforgettable. One of the most striking reasons a man may return after no contact is because your glow up is undeniable. Whether it's physical, emotional, spiritual, or all of the above, your transformation does not go unnoticed. While he may have expected you to struggle after the breakup, to cry, to beg, or to spiral, the reality is that you chose growth. Instead of collapsing under the weight of heartbreak, you used it as fuel. You began investing in yourself, prioritizing your peace, and evolving in ways that made you stronger, wiser, and undeniably more radiant. This kind of glow up isn't just about looks, though that may be part of it. It's about the total energy shift. You walk differently. You speak with more confidence. Your boundaries are firmer. Your standards higher. And your tolerance for games or emotional inconsistencies gone. You stop shrinking yourself to fit into someone else's comfort zone. And in doing so, you reclaim parts of yourself that were dimmed or denied during the relationship. This kind of self-elevation is magnetic, especially to someone who once took your light for granted. Social media, mutual friends, or even random run-ins might expose him to this new version of you. And it hits differently, not in a shallow, jealous way, but in a reality check kind of way. He realizes the woman you've become is not the same one he left. She's evolved, elevated, and harder to reach, not because she's bitter, but because she's healed. That kind of glow up forces a man to confront his own stagnation. He starts to feel the distance, not just physically, but in terms of emotional maturity and personal development. What makes this transformation so powerful is that it wasn't performative. You didn't do it to get him back. You did it because you had to. You hit a point where survival meant transformation. Whether you threw yourself into fitness, therapy, journaling, traveling, or simply rediscovering joy, every choice you made was rooted in a deep commitment to yourself. And that kind of self-love shines in a way no external validation ever could. He doesn't just see the glow, he feels the shift in your energy. For many men, especially those who left without clarity or accountability, seeing your glow up brings a mix of emotions: admiration, confusion, and sometimes even regret. He begins to wonder, how did she become even more beautiful, more powerful, more at peace without me? That realization can shake a man who thought you'd fall apart without him. Instead, you became someone who doesn't need him. And that, ironically, is what pulls him back in. Not because you're available, but because you're no longer accessible in the same way. The glow up also reminds him of the potential he once had in his life and lost. You were always valuable, always worthy, but maybe he didn't see it clearly back then. Now, from the outside looking in, he's watching a version of you that's thriving without his support, that can lead him to question his own growth. Have I evolved? Or am I still the same man who let her go? Your glow up holds a mirror to his stagnation. And that contrast can be as painful as it is motivating. Ultimately, your glow up isn't about revenge or making him regret his choices. It's a testament to your resilience. You rose without needing to shout. You healed without needing to explain. You flourished without needing an audience. And while your growth may have started as a response to pain, it became something so much more. A declaration of self-worth. It is that transformation, quiet, consistent, and powerful, that lingers in his mind long after the silence has begun. In the end, the silence of no contact speaks volumes. It's not just an absence, it's a boundary, a mirror, and sometimes even a reset. When you choose not to chase, not to plead, not to beg for answers, you create space. And in that space, a man is left to confront what he walked away from and who he becomes without your presence in his life. Some return because they miss the comfort, others because they feel guilt, curiosity, or regret. But many return because they finally see the value that was always there, now sharpened by your glow up, protected by your peace, and solidified by your growth. The woman they thought would wait is no longer standing in the same place. She has moved, she has evolved, and she has rewritten the story with or without him. So whether he comes back or not, the truth is this: you were never waiting, you were rising. And in that quiet, dignified rise, you didn't just reclaim your power, you redefined your worth.